Howdy folks. So I'm preparing for an upgrade to my primary pfSense router, which you would have seen in a previous video. And to understand what I'm doing, I need to give a little bit of backstory. So when I built the router about 2 years ago now, I put 4 network cards in it. And I have some of them are these. I have 2 of these. These are PCI 100 megabit cards, and I have one of these, which is a gigabit card, also PCI, and then I also have, I only have one of them, so I can't show it to you. It's in the machine right now, and it's a PCI Express X1 gigabit card as well, all Intel, of course. And this is what I made my network up of, and it worked fine. That was the idea. I mean, it's not great to mix and match things, but I mean, the speeds worked out and everything. And I tested them before I put it into service. Everything was fine. I put it into service, and very quickly I realized that there was some problem, because pretty much randomly, I never really was able to figure out why. The newest network card, so the PCI Express one, would effectively lock up in that sense. Every packet it tried to receive would be an error. It would just error out, wouldn't be able to receive any packets. And there was nothing that you could do to fix that other than reboot the machine. And I tried everything. I tried changing every kernel network tunable I could find. And I scoured the internet for anybody who had problems like this. And I couldn't really find anything definitive. I tried everything, and I mean the timescales were so big that I really didn't get a lot of tries at it. I mean, it would fail, a month after you boot it up, or it could fail within a day, it could fail within a month, could fail within 2 months. So I mean, you really don't know if it really got fixed or if it just hasn't happened yet. And anyway, I ended up adjusting the buffer size, the receive buffer size, and I just maxed it out on the card, which is about 4 megs, and it didn't happen again. And I was really happy. It had been over a year and nothing had happened. So I'd sort of just forgotten about it. I thought that really was the fix. Maybe it just had a buffer overflow that run away or something. But unfortunately, it didn't work. And just about 2-3 weeks ago, it failed. And exact same way. So obviously, it's not stable. So it had been up for about a year, so it was about 6 versions behind. So I decided I would upgrade from 2.1.5 to 2.2.4. So that's a big change. The whole underlying OS used to be FreeBSD 8, 8.3, and now it's FreeBSD 10. So big update. I thought, maybe a new driver. Because I'm blaming the driver. I'm not blaming the card. Maybe the new driver in FreeBSD 10 doesn't have that flakiness problem. And so I upgraded and had some minor hiccups with that. Ended up upgrading, and within 2 days, I had another failure. But it was different this time, because instead of it just immediately erroring out on every packet, the receive interrupt service routine basically took up 100% of the CPU. It sort of went into like an infinite loop. And again, nothing I could do about that except for reboot the machine, and then I could get it working again. So, I mean, this was really upsetting to me. And I had really 2 options in my mind. The first one, which is sort of the obvious one, is rip out the new card and put in an old card, because these cards, the 100 megabit cards, use the FXP driver. These older gigabit cards use the legacy EM driver, and then the new cards use the new EM driver. And it's that new EM driver that seems to be the problem. So I thought, okay, well, I could just rip that card out, replace it with, it would have to be a 100 megabit card. I don't have any, there's no other way in that configuration to do a gigabit card. But I mean, that's not really the way I wanted to do it. I mean, yes, I could make all the cards older, but I wanted to try and fix it, I think, in a better way, rather than sort of downgrade the speeds, sort of make everything more uniform. So instead of doing that, which, I mean, I can still do if what I actually chose doesn't work, and we're going to find out quite shortly if that's the case, I went out and I bought something. I went out and I bought this beast. So this is a quad port Intel server grade gigabit NIC. It runs on PCI Express X4. And this is going to replace all the NICs in the device. So I can basically put this in, rip out everything else, get rid of all the PCI stuff, all the legacy stuff, and just have this. And the idea is, because all the NICs are the same, and they're all running on PCI Express, not PCI, it could get rid of some weird interrupt problems, all sorts of weird stuff that could be going on. I mean, I don't know. The other thing is this card, because it's a proper server card, runs the IGB driver, not the EM driver, because these cards are technically workstation cards. So that driver I would expect to be of higher quality, and of course it's just different driver. So you know, I mean, I might as well try that. So this card, just if anyone's curious, it's a G18771, and if you Google this, you're just going to get a bunch of eBay listings. If you actually look that up on Intel's website, you get nothing. I am pretty sure that this is an Intel Gigabit ET card, which is currently at end of life. They've discontinued it. They've superseded it with the ET2, which looks almost identical, if not identical to this. I really don't have a high enough resolution image to tell. I don't think this is an ET2. Judging by its age, I mean, this was pulled from working gear. And judging by some of the date codes, I mean, most of these chips don't have date codes, but there's a couple that have things that resemble date codes, and my guess is that this was early 2011 when this was manufactured. And given the fact that the ET came out in late 2009, it makes sense. So that's my guess anyway as to what this is. So the specs are pretty much the same as the ET2, and you can actually get specs on the chipset if you search around Intel's website hard enough. So I did get the data on this, and it's quite a nice card. I mean, it wasn't terribly expensive. I think I got this shipping, tax, and everything included. I think it was like $67 Canadian or something. So not bad. It just happened to be in the city next to me, so it came next day, everything. It was quite nice. So of course it's quad port, and this will replace all the 4 ports. So I've got WAN, LAN, wireless LAN, guest wireless LAN. They'll all be gigabit now, so no more 10100 stuff, which is nice. I mean, even though things like the WAN won't saturate gigabit, it'll be a nice sort of upgrade. And all of these will have, you know, sequential MAC addresses. They'll all have the same driver. They'll all be using the same interrupts. That's my idea. Now this thing, just a quick look. We've got magnetics, the four magnetics transformers here. We've got two heatsink devices, and I don't entirely know what's under these. One of these is the chipset, and the other one I'm not entirely sure. They both look like the same package. When you look at the side, they're both BGAs, they're both the same size, but they're definitely not the same device. This one, yeah, they're definitely not the same device, because you can see the die on this one stick up and this one you can't. So, and of course the heat sinks are different, so this one probably dissipates less power than this one does, so it's definitely not the same thing. And there's an IDT part here, 89 HPES12N3A1ZC. I have no idea what that does. This is kind of interesting. We just got power delivery on this side, and this is a Dell part card, by the way. There is a Dell part number here, HM9JY, which is another thing you can Google. Basically, that part number is synonymous with this this model, because apparently Dell sold a lot of these in their servers. But I mean, these are great things to pick up online. I mean, it's kind of strange because all of my workstations, all of my servers, they all have proper server grade NICs in them, dual port server NICs. And of course my router, probably the most important networking device I own, has consumer workstation class cards. So I think it's about time that I bought something and upgraded to this. So I mean, this thing puts out a lot of heat. It's rated at a TDP of, I think, 8.4 or 9.4 watts. So that's continuous too. So that's a pretty decent amount of power. And one of the things I'm worried about is the airflow over this. How much airflow this is really going to get in the case. To be honest, I don't think it's going to get anything more than the convection that it generates with its own heat, because there's really only an exhaust fan up here. There's nothing down here, so I'll have to do some thermal tests to see if this thing will need some sort of like a ghetto-mounted fan to cool it. Because of course, in a real server, there'd be airflow over this, but in my server, it doesn't have that. But of course, it can be added if necessary. But I only want to add it if it's truly necessary. So the first thing I'm going to do before I put this in service is I want to get out my test machine, which has pfSense on it. It's not identical in any way to the actual router, but I want to take this and do a stress test on it. So make sure that pfSense really does support it. I mean, it's supposed to be supported in FreeBSD 10.1 natively, so I shouldn't have to compile my own driver. I should just be plug and play. So I'll make sure that actually works. I'll make sure that all the ports work. And then I will basically set up sort of like a traffic shaper, just a little bit of cross subnetwork rules, and then just pass a whole bunch of traffic. I'll run iperf and stuff. Just throw as much at this as I can, and just see how it handles it. Make sure that there's no errors, no software errors. The driver doesn't do anything weird. I'll monitor the temperature with an IR thermometer and maybe my thermal camera just to see how hot it gets under like the maximum possible load, which of course it'll never get in normal operation. But I just want to make sure this works fine before I put this into service, because reconfiguring all the interfaces on pfSense is kind of a brutal thing to do. pfSense isn't terribly happy when you decide to change all of the NICs all at once. And of course you have to do it from the VGA console, because of course you can't talk to it any other way. So I'd rather only do this once rather than sort of put it in, realize, oh shit, it doesn't work, or there's something I haven't figured out yet, and then put the old cards back in. So I'm just going to make sure it works. I'll show you that, and if that goes as planned, I will replace it and hopefully not have any issues. So this is my test setup. So I've just got my sort of everything test rig here, just a quad-core AMD machine, and I've ripped out all the NICs and put in the new one that I just received. Put that in there, and I've sort of connected it up in the most ghetto fashion possible. I've just got a couple switches, and I've utilized a couple computers and laptops throughout the house that I can safely take off the network. And I've used them for this testing purpose. So as you can see, I've just got 3 of those ports connected there. I could add a 4th device just to test the 4th port, but I mean, if 3 of them work, I mean, the port does work. You can plug a cable into it, the lights come on, and it just detects a link up. So I'm not really worried about the hardware. I'm more worried about the software. Really, that's really what I want to test. So what I'm doing for this, I've just installed pfSense on this machine here. It's the same version, same architecture as what's in my actual router, and you can see I'm running iperf between this laptop and another machine, and they're both gigabit devices, and I'm doing a bidirectional test. So you can see I'm getting just over 900 megbits in one direction and almost 600 megbits in the other direction. And this is just a continuous test, and you can see in the traffic, it's been going on for quite a while now. And the other one is just, it's called the WAN on this test router, which is actually connected to my LAN. So it's basically it's a network within a network. But I can't actually get internet access on these devices if I need to. So that's what the 3rd one there is. You can see that this thing really, I mean, 14% CPU with that kind of traffic, it's really nothing for it. This is completely stock. I mean, all I've done is just enabled the 3 interfaces, set up a firewall rule that allows basically everything between every interface, and then just started iperf up. That's really all I've done. And I want to let this thing go for a few hours, and I'm checking the logs. I'm getting nothing, which is what I expect to see, and I'm not getting any interface errors, and that's really what I want to see. The other thing I wanted to notice was how hot this thing gets. And this thing is, of course, it's a server card. It's designed to go in the server. And the datasheet says operating temperature between 0 and 55 degrees Celsius. Now, the way I interpret that is the ambient air temperature must be less than 55, which, of course, in this situation it is. It's about 24, I think, in here. So maybe right around the card, maybe a little bit warmer than that.
But it doesn't get any airflow in this case, and it's not going to get any airflow really other than the convection it generates by itself in the end case. So I'm not quite sure how well this thing will do thermally. I've got my infrared thermometer here. I find this is a little bit easier to use than the thermal camera for getting exact temperature measurements, but the hot spot is right on that corner of the card there, and it's about 72 degrees or so. I wonder if I can, there you go. About 72, 73 degrees. And basically you plug the card in, you turn it on after about 10 minutes. You can even have nothing connected to it and it will get that hot. And then you can put in, you know, over a gigabit worth of traffic and it still remains that temperature. So it seems this card doesn't really fluctuate in temperature that much. And I mean, that doesn't really surprise me. I mean, it's a server grade card. It's not like a laptop chipset. It's not designed for power savings. It's designed to push packets through as quickly as possible. So it doesn't really surprise me that it's just, you know, churning away all the time, basically at the same rate, regardless of the load. So I'm okay with it. If it stays at this temperature, I mean, I would like it to operate a little cooler, but at the end of the day, I mean, it is designed to run like this, and 70, 75 degrees is not unheard of for a silicon device. I mean, most things will shut down when they get to about 100, so it's a little on the high end, but it's still okay. So I'll probably just run it like this. My thought was, you know, if it really was too much, I'd put a fan on the bottom on some stands blowing air directly upwards at it, but I don't think I'm going to need that, to be honest. So yeah, I'm just going to keep this test running for a few hours, just periodically check on it, and at this point, if it hasn't failed yet, I doubt it will, but I mean, the other failure I was getting before was completely, you couldn't predict it at all. Sometimes it would take literally a year to manifest itself, so I'll just let this go, and if everything goes to plan, I will put this in the final server. So after all the tests that I did, I determined that the card was stable and I should go ahead with the install. So I did that, and it did not go as expected. So it was a bit chaotic 4 hours, so I didn't film anything, but I'll just go over what ended up happening. So I took this machine down, ripped out all the NICs, put in the new quad IGB card, plugged it all back in, started it up. Of course, pfSense realizes the Macs are all different, asks you to reassign all the interfaces. So this is just a VGA console, so you normally just type in the addresses, or the interface names. So I did that, and it did not respond to key presses. In fact, it didn't respond to anything. The entire system was effectively locked up, and after about 30 seconds, it reset to the BIOS and rebooted again. And it did this twice before I physically stopped it and powered it off. And what I think is happening was something was locking up on the motherboard, and a watchdog timer was expiring and resetting the system. So what I did was I unplugged all of the cables from the NIC, but I left the NIC in. This time it booted up and it worked. It actually got all the way through. I could reassign the interfaces, got the firewall running. But as soon as you plug anything into it, the whole thing would lock up again. And I spent about 4 hours trying to work through all the system tunables, trying to change the interrupt types, everything. Nothing worked. And I've come to the conclusion that it is something wrong with this motherboard. Either hardware-wise, or most likely it's just a software incompatibility, like firmware between the BIOS, the ACPI, something like that. It does not work properly. And there is really no way I'm going to get it to work with this machine. So even though I really wanted to keep this thing going, I think it's been a decade, and I cannot reliably get this to work, even with the older cards. Obviously the EM card, the EM driver really has nothing wrong with it. It's definitely just this board. So I think it has something to do with interrupts, probably when packets arrive on the interface, it interrupts the CPU, and that triggers something to go wrong. So unfortunately I pulled this from service, and I've been running off of the backup router ever since. So I just basically exported config.xml into this. So this is basically an exact clone of this machine. and of course it's running on the new card and everything works fine. So originally I was going to just go out and buy a new CPU, motherboard, and RAM for this machine and just do that. That was just sort of what I would do by default. And it costs about $300 for those components, just to put a Celeron in here with 8 gigs of RAM. And I kind of did the math, and it didn't really work out that well. It's actually better, it's more cost effective for me to just put the backup machine directly into service. I mean, I already own it, and it works perfectly fine as I've seen here. Yes, the power consumption is sort of horrendous, but I mean, the amount of time it would take to pay back the cost of new hardware versus the power cost doesn't work too well. So I'm just going to take this board out and put it in this case, because this case is too big to fit in the cavity in the closet there. So I'll just move that over. I'll reinstall pfSense 2.2.4 onto the SSD, bring back config.xml, just restore the config exactly the way I did on this machine yesterday, and hopefully that should get everything up and running. I'm going to try and make this as power efficient as I can, of course. I'm going to try and disable all of the motherboard features, things like that. There's only one thing that's kind of concerning me right now. There's actually 4 DIMMs in here. There's these 2 Corsair ones that have silver heatsinks, and there's also 2 ones that do not have heatsinks. I think they're Kingston modules. They should all be 2 gigs, so this should have 8 gigs of memory in it. But BSD reports having only 6 gigs, which is quite unusual. So that's something I want to look into. Either one of these DIMMs is bad, or there's something going on with this motherboard. Because I remember this machine used to have 8 gigs, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. I may actually boot Linux and see if it sees 8 gigs. That'll tell me if BSD has got something weird going on. But unfortunately I have to take the network down to move this over here. So I'm going to take this Mobo out, try and reduce the downtime as much as possible, because I have about an hour before the DHCP leases expire and all of the servers on the network start beeping. There's a script that I wrote, runs every 15 minutes, and it checks to see if they have valid leases on the network, and if they don't, they start beeping the PC speakers. So I really kind of don't want that to happen. Also, all my VMs crash, so you know, I've got bigger problems. But anyway, I'll get to that and update you when it's done. So here it is, all finished. So I've just put that backup server in this case and reinstalled it all, and it's working just fine. So hopefully there's no issues with this. I looked into the memory, and in fact the 2 smaller DIMMs, which are Kingston manufactured, they are actually 1 gig, so it is reporting the correct RAM. I got confused. I don't actually happen to own any more 2 gig DIMMs. I looked through my bin of DIMMs, so I guess I'll just leave 6 gigs in here. It's more than the 4 gigs I had before, which is good. So now that I know it's probably not Squid screwing up the memory, I can probably increase the maximum cache size in this machine. So I'll get to the tweaking and stuff later. That's not really that important right now. So I'll just run it for a few days, make sure that there's no obvious glaring issues, and then I can tweak to suit the new hardware, maybe change the traffic shaper rules around. I'm not entirely sure if they're percentage based or absolute bandwidth based, because if they're percentage based, then they may not work correctly now that some of the NICs are gigabit instead of 10100, so I'll have to check those out. So yeah, this didn't go as I had expected, but anyway, I just thought I'd document it as much as I can anyway. So hopefully this was interesting. Thanks for watching.